You think Common Ground is worth a buck? Consider leaving a tip at lptv.org. Lakeland Public Television presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm John Parsons. In this episode, we discover hidden treasure in the studio of a Cohasset sculptor. And we get to listen in as he shares secrets from his creative process.
Hi, my name's Tom Page. I'm an artist and a sculptor in Cohasset, Minnesota. My medium is primarily bronze, and I'm having a show in Bigfork, Edge of the Wilderness Gallery. I'd like you to follow along, and we'll follow up with a studio tour after that. It was a terrific show at Bigfork. The work that I brought up there was primarily figurative art, and there were some pieces that were wildlife in nature, but I don't really consider myself to be a wildlife artist. The themes that I brought up would have been kayakers, canoers. I used to be in the ski industry, and I'm very close to that sport. So I had a few ski sculptures that I brought up with me. I did a commission for the Grand Rapids Area Library in about 2001, I believe. I continued the theme of that sculpture in a smaller series of females reading books in unusual positions, and they were a spin-off of the library sculpture titled Rapture of Reading. It's how you get lost in the experience, where reading takes you, and the adventures that you travel through just opening up a book. I really like small communities, and I think they're very deserving of cultural experiences. A lot of small communities have art galleries, theater, symphonies, orchestras. Bigfork was very interesting in that it's a very small town. It's barely more than an intersection, but they have a hospital. They have a relatively new school. They have a modern art gallery. They have a beautiful performing arts center. And I thought, these are the type of people that I would like to associate with and have a show. Hi, good to see you. Yeah, I'm glad you could make it.
Well,
So I agreed to the show, and we had a month-long exhibit, and it was well received, and I enjoyed it a great deal. It was the first show I had been to in Bigfork. I really didn't know what to expect for the turnout. We had primarily a Bigfork turnout, nice people, they were very complimentary. As the show went on, more people came up from the larger city of Grand Rapids to Bigfork to see the show. Oh, look who's here. Janice, how are you?
I brought goodies for the
Oh,
table.
you didn't have to do that, but that's so sweet. This is my wife, Deb. Let me go put these on the table. I'll be back. Maybe we could get some pictures.
That'd be lovely.
I make sculptures for public places and private collectors. Public places would be artwork of the people, artwork that you can go and see virtually any time of day or night unless it's indoors. The private collector pieces tend to be a little smaller, but occasionally somebody will request something life-size. So they come in all sizes and shapes. I think most people would consider me to be a figurative artist, working with the human form and recognizable objects. Nothing is standardized. By that I mean that I do have artwork that somebody can purchase if they like it. But there's also the occasion where somebody will come up to you and say, I'm interested in commissioning a work of art. My wife and I had this experience and we can afford and would like to have a private work of art that reflects that experience. Can you come up with some ideas? Can you interpret what we're telling you and come up with an aesthetically pleasing way that we might be interested in? And that's how that negotiation would commonly start. I'm not a gallery artist by nature for a variety of reasons. I think I'm like many other artists. You have a medium that you go to, that you like for various reasons, but that is probably not the same as the way that you think. I maintain hundreds of sketchbooks that have ideas that include all kinds of different mediums, but primarily I like bronze. It's been around for about 5,000 years. I like it because it has a very nice look. You can enhance the raw metal with beautiful patinas. It's a nice looking metal, unlike say cast iron or other ferrous metals. Okay, and all you do is just tap to focus and then push down. Oh, the poor guy. The poor guy.
Sorry. Can you see it?
I'm sorry, Alex. That's so mean.
You know, one more without him crying, and there would just be.
We'll do it quick.
Hopefully he doesn't get away too quick. Thank you so much. Can you grab him?
Yeah.
Can I take a picture?
Hi, this is my studio. This is where I do my work and spend most of my days, and I'd like to show you around. Most of the time I spend here is working by myself. I don't have employees, and conceptually I come up with ideas and put them to practice here in the studio. Requires some tools, some knowledge, and most of all, imagination. You'll see old work in here and new work alike. Much of what I've done recently is being stored. I'm getting ready for a new body of work. The work that I do ranges everything from a political nature to something that is personal to the artist and everything in between. A lot of artists will only do what moves them. And I'm more of a laborer in that I enjoy sitting down with groups of people and finding out what their ideas are, what message they'd like to convey, and then I go back and examine how that can be done creatively and carry the message that they give me. So I'm kind of mission oriented. This is a sculpture of a drummer, and this is a baran. It's a hoop drum, Celtic drum, common in all the continents across the world, one of the universal instruments. Many people consider the drum to be the original instrument because it mimicked the heartbeat. They found by stretching skin over wood that they could simulate the heartbeat of mankind. And this is a piece that's partially through the mold making process. This is a silicone that has to be built up a little thicker, and then there'll be another mold made around that will support it, and it's disassembled, and through a lengthy procedure it ends up in a final material. In this case it'll be bronze. Back here is Joseph R. Brown, and this is a resin cast model of a sculpture that was completed in bronze for Henderson, Minnesota. And it's a historical piece. Joseph R. Brown founded Henderson. He helped found Stillwater, helped build Fort Snelling, fought in the Sioux Uprising, was an entrepreneur in early Minnesota history, and he was also head of the first political party in the state of Minnesota. So this is a sculpture I did commemorating all of that for the city of Henderson, Minnesota. What we see along here are just shelves of molds of past work, some works in progress, some works that are just in repose. These would be indicative of smaller pieces that are going to be freestanding or be cast as a small piece and assembled into something much larger. This sculpture was a proposal in about 1978 to the city of Duluth. It depicts special forces carrying one of their wounded off the field, how Americans did not leave soldiers behind, and it's an honorable depiction of a very difficult war and time in American history. The city of Duluth, they were interested in a Vietnam Veterans Memorial that would be part of what they called the bunker and also the wall. Interesting story was I was working with Lori Fido, the mayor's wife, John Fido, and in about 30 days he lost the re-election, so they moved out of Duluth. The first war in the Gulf started, which took focus away from Vietnam veterans issues, and the economy started to swirl and go down at about the same time, and this sculpture was not commissioned as a result of that perfect storm of distractions. But I think the sculpture still holds up, although it's been through a studio fire and is partly melted, but I keep it around because I still like the piece. This is a piece that I have a personal interest in. I like history, I like archaeology, I like anthropology, and I like seeing what's happened over the millennia. And I took an early Celtic drummer. Well, let me tell you about the sculpture that came before this one. There is a sculpture at the Rife Performing Arts Center that they commissioned, and the sculpture is of the same theme. It's a drummer, but it represents that first moment where mankind discovered creativity, that flashpoint, the very first time, and you can only do that metaphorically. The piece at the Rife is called The First Strike, and it's where the tipper, the stick is outstretched, and the drum is positioned for that moment where the two meet and give birth to the arts. So that was the original concept of this series. This is the one that's the latest of that thought process, where, okay, we've been drumming for 1,000 years, we know that it moves people. People get up and dance around the campfire, they're inspired by it, and now we're going to make it into performance. This represents that part of the evolution of the arts. And I took that theme from the inception of a creative act. This is the second in that series or vein, and this one's called The Crossing, and it's that point where creativity, the spark of creativity has been ignited, and now we're into the full spectrum of performance. And this is obviously a dramatic interpretation of a drummer and the performance, the passion, the enthusiasm, and even athleticism that comes with it. This piece has been proposed to Daniel Rooney, the ambassador to Ireland, as a gift to Ireland. I've also proposed this to Notre Dame, the Kennedy Center in New York, and also the Kennedy Library that's celebrating its 50th year of existence this year. And I hope to find a home for it, but until then, this is the original, and there is a drum. It's a hoop drum. These have existed on every continent since the birth of mankind. And this will go in the hand up here like this. And then we have the striker down here in a very dramatic pose. The drum is interesting because archaeologically they've discovered that this type of hoop drum with the leather may have started out, or at some point was used as a tray to carry peat out of the bogs to be used for building buildings or fueling fire. I don't have to demonstrate for you to get it, but you carry your peat out of the bog. So you can think of it as an early shovel or basket or carrier. Drums are also used to entertain people, to simulate the heartbeat, to give them a cadence. And that cadence historically has also been used to march troops on the battlefield. And they come in all sizes, big, small. Some of the Asian drums are just enormous and they're played with fervor. And this is the same context, just European style. So the drum as a metaphor, as a symbol of where we have been in history, is a very strong one. This is an Inuit sculpture, taking to the water with a flotation bladder for the hunt. This is just an imagery that I'm kind of drawn to, whether it's canoers, whether it's kayakers, the idea of taking to the water, of man and nature. It can be interpreted in many ways, but I just like the imagery, and there's an elegance of canoes, of kayaks, of most watercraft. Let me give you 30 seconds about this drawing because it's important to me. This was done in about 1966, 67. It was one of my 3 best buddies from college. It's the 60s, we're all art students and finding our own identity. Bill was a year older than the rest of us, a little more worldly, a little more mature, but wore black drapery and shells around his neck, had long black hair, and occasionally would have a dot in his forehead. He subscribed to Eastern religions. Bill made, among other things, he made Eastern instruments, tambura, sitar, and he would buy an occasional instrument. Didn't have a driver's license, so he'd say, "Tom, I'll give you $2, you take me out to the airport." Okay, we'd go out to the airport and would pick his instruments up in customs. Well, this is the 60s, and every customs person goes, hollow instrument, gourds. We know what's inside there. And they would rip the metal soundboards off that damn near destroy the instrument. It was not a clandestine business deal. And I would be sitting there going, "No, don't do that, don't do that." And the more I protest, of course, the more they know there's something illegal. And Bill took it just fine. He didn't get upset. And I did this drawing, 1966. About 6 years ago, Bill died. I mean, there's all kinds of layers of tragedy behind this, but I think if you look at the drawing, there's almost something you can see in his future that's going to be tragic. And I still have the drawing, and it's one of those things where you're so grateful that you did it when you did it, and you have it to remember him by now. And this drawing sat in my drawer for 40 years, and then I asked my wife if she'd frame it for me. She owns a frame shop, and I put it up. I enjoy it every day. It's one of those things that you wouldn't sell, trade for anything, and it validates art and why we do it on a personal level. Okay, I think we'll go in the other room where I have some sculptures and I like to do my painting. In the sculpture theme, this is a piece I made a few years ago. This was made in a maquette, a miniature, and it was also reproduced as a life-size piece. It's something that northern Minnesota people can relate to. It's a ice fisherman digging his hole, getting ready for his outing on the ice. Winter's a mystical time in any northern climate, especially Minnesota, Wisconsin, where you get those steel gray days. It's a solitary experience. I've always found it interesting that if there are 50 people out on the lake ice fishing, there are 50 people and each one has his own ice auger. I guess they don't share these things, or they're so into the experience that they want to do it all themselves. There's a famous painting, I think it's by Edward Hopper. It's the one with the cafe where the three people are sitting at the stools and it's 4 a.m. I liken this to that painting in that the winter is a solitary time and ice fishing is probably, for most people, a solitary experience. And this is supposed to reflect on that. There's not a lot of detail, there's not a lot of recognition because everybody's bundled up in scarves and hats and insulated clothing. There's a lot of anonymity out there. And other than just being a sculpture, it does reflect a certain social attitude to what goes on in Minnesota in the wintertime. My hope as an artist, I think, is probably universal with other artists, and that's just to be able to do your work. There are very few people in their professions that would actually pay to do the work without remuneration, without payment, but to have to pay to do it. In the art world, I would say the majority of artists actually pay for their ability to work at their art. And I respect artists for that because you cannot say that of many professions. One of my favorite quotes is, "Talent does what it can, and genius does what it must." Trust me, I'm not suggesting that all artists are geniuses, but they do what they can every day of their life. I give artists respect for what they do, whether they're commercially successful, whether they're publicly successful, just the fact that they do it at whatever level. You have to respect them for that dedication. For the last 10 years, I've been on a mission to bring the concept of creativity to the forefront. And it's important, I think, not just as it relates to the arts, but it's also important to the success as a culture. And it's something that we've done very well in the past. And I think that by all studies, we're starting to lose ground in the field of creativity. Creativity is important because it's something that you have to look at without prejudice, which is not a bad way to look at anything. And you have to have a new perspective, you have to have an open mind, but it's important in the way we govern, the way we go about business, our professional lives. As an example, I use a doctor. You want a creative doctor. Any doctor that graduates from medical school has an MD behind their name. But if I have a mystery disease, I want that doctor that can think abstractly and think about, well, we know what this isn't, what could it be? What are the possibilities? To think in a paradigm that's broader than the conventional MD. So creativity cannot be denied for its importance, but it's ironic that, like art, it's not taught in the school system, K through 12, nor can you get a degree in creativity on the college level. But it's the thing that defines your success. is your ability to see things, think differently, and apply those to whatever your profession is, whether you're an engineer, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a medical professional, or whether you're a visual artist like myself. We won't make progress unless we embrace a creative element. There are a couple things you have to become accustomed to if you're going to be an artist. One is rejection, and the other one is that all the projects, as well-intentioned as they may be, or how well-footed they may start out, don't reach completion. It's just the nature of the business. Well, the tragedy is to spend your life with more time than ideas. And like I say, I'll die with more ideas than time. So the fact that they don't all become realized in a permanent public work of art does not make me crestfallen. I understand that.
Thanks so much for watching. Join us again next week for another episode of Common Ground. If you have an idea for a Common Ground piece that pertains to North Central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call us 218-333-3022. To view any episode of Common Ground online, visit us at lptv.org. To order individual segments or entire episodes of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people on the 4th of November, 2008.